And we're live.
What time is it? 6? 5:30.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone.
What's going on, guys? So, finally back on the podcast. Hopefully we're going to be doing this, like we said, as we always do, once a month and not have any more, for lack of better words, screw up our schedules.
You call it Time of the Month podcast.
Time of the month podcast. I like that.
I don't know how women would feel about that, but go on.
I know. Well, men have that too. We just nobody talks about
What's
it.
the name of it?
Andropause.
But that would be
Sorry, no. That's
What do you
menopause,
release?
Sorry. But
we have a monthly cycle?
Yeah, we do have a monthly cycle.
Oh, okay.
What do we release? It's not blood, obviously.
Is it a wet dream?
Probably. But we do have a week of the during the month as well. Just nobody talks about it, and it's a different form of hormonal spike than women.
Interesting.
But we do go through things. So yes, we do have our time of the month as well, ladies.
I bet it was called Werewolf one day. Werewolf week.
Possible. More testosterone, more hair growing all over the place.
That makes sense.
Just like
Maybe that's how they were suffering. Too much hair.
That's how Scott Sasquatch suffered.
Maybe.
Talking about Sasquatch. What
What is the topic
creature is
today?
What kind of creature is Sasquatch?
Well, we'll be talking about.
Alright,
that.
perfect. So, how do you want to start this then, Chris? Huh?
We're talking about aliens! So, let's actually get into it. What is the narrative of aliens? Andrew, when you think of aliens, what is the narrative right now of aliens?
I gotta tell you, I haven't really been watching the news or anything like that for a while.
If I were to tell you that in Congress they talked about aliens, what would that give you as a narrative right there?
I would say some other point of distraction coming up soon. Whether they're showing us something real that they've been hiding for a long time,
You're going way beyond the question.
but if you're talking about it in Congress, I just assume it's giving us like some sort of preparation for
Fear.
Yeah, exactly. Anything to kind of puppet us again.
When you see it in movies, what happens? Right? We're always thinking of aliens as the bad guys.
It's rarely as like it's not usually a good point. Yeah, it's that's valid, right? 'Cause you never know. You're like, okay, so if someone has the ability to, I don't know, travel between dimensions or even planetary systems, why would they be so? I don't want to say that we're dumb, but sometimes we're unaware or living in a fear mindset or things like that. Why would they be thinking higher if they have those abilities, right? It doesn't really make sense. It's like they expect them to come here, like you talk about dimensions, I don't know a lot, but like 2D thinking in someone that can do something a million times more challenging than what we understand.
And that's
Well,
what
you
we're
just said
talking about.
something great. It's a distraction, right? Like anything that's being shown in the mainstream media, now that we know that it's owned by the government and owned by certain people, we know that it's done as a distraction.
But
But
you walked in, did you hear what was playing on his sound system?
No.
It was Money by Pink Floyd. Sorry, keep going.
It's all good. But even though it's being shown as a distraction right now between everything else,
Yeah.
it is making people finally feel like, whoa, this is real. We're not crazy anymore. It's not a tinfoil hat theory anymore. It's the truth. There are things out there that no one knows about. So now we, in this show, get to narrate and guide where that narration
Or
goes.
give our opinion on it.
100%. So, that's one thing. Now, disclosure's happening right now, for sure to, cover up for Joe Biden's criminal family. But what I really like is that there's a channel on YouTube called Infographics, and they have been literally making animations. You should all go watch it. Infographics. And they've been making animations of how every country in the world has had an experience with UFOs. And they're actually making nice animations to make everyone be aware that, hey, it happened in Brazil, it happened in Soviet Union, which is now Russia, it happened in Iran, it's happened in many countries. And now it's full disclosure in the way that these countries are coming out and saying, no, we've had these experiences. But now here's the thing. What were they? And what do you think they were?
I believe they were our friends from outside the world. That's
So
all.
you think the machinery that they're witnessing, if it's a machinery,
Oh,
that's another thing
so,
too, right?
Okay, wait. What machinery are you talking about now? Things in the sky, things on the ground. What do you experience?
So UFOs, which are called AFO now, or
I didn't
APAs?
even know that. Okay.
You don't know?
Oh.
They're not calling them UFOs anymore.
No.
Really?
Yeah, they're calling them aerial phenomenon unidentified.
Right. Why can't we just use the real term? Like they're people like they're just human beings like other everybody else, except they're just from outside the world. And that's why I like
UFOs.
But they're not. I mean, we call them aliens or extraterrestrials, but they're just other beings that are from outside the space, from our dimensions that we don't understand of.
Extraterrestrial. That makes sense. Then outside of.
Yeah.
That makes sense. You're right, because UFO be like unidentified flying object.
So have
That's
you-
a little meh.
Both ever heard of Dr. Stephen Greer?
100%.
No. Oh, you showed me videos in the group chat. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about him, man.
Well, I don't know much about him, but I just know of certain people that actually got a chance to meet him and actually say that he's encountered a few things. Off the record, I can't really say because it's not my to say things, but there are serious encounters with the extraterrestrials, with the friends from outside, where again I can't say much, but they can kind of showed them the way in the sense that gave them answers to their questions that they were asking for. Kind of like when you ask the universe to manifest certain things and stuff happens. Well, they were asking the extraterrestrials just certain questions, certain beings, just like they're talking like a regular human being.
So what Ad's talking about is an actual thing that they do with Stephen Greer. He does what's called 4EP or something. He calls it something, but it's an actual service he provides where people go with him into the desert.
Oh.
He actually has security guards protecting him, and they get in a circle and they do a type of meditation. Which actually, if you ever check out his name, Stephen Greer, he actually wants you to do it for free. So if you go on his website, he actually gives you the steps of how to meditate and communicate with extraterrestrials, which is really cool.
Hold on now, let me stop him there. You got to be really connected to reach these extraterrestrials because they only adhere to people with a higher intention, not just to I want to talk with them and that's it. Because
Well, like you were saying, right? They will answer you, right? They will, aliens will come down to give you the information you're seeking.
Yeah.
But again, like Anthony said, only if you're like pure of heart.
Yeah.
Only if you really do the meditations and the rituals that they're doing. Because at the end of the day, aliens know what your intent is before you know it.
And that's the reason why also, well, I'll go on the topic of mushrooms. When we're on the topic of mushrooms, I mean, why do you take mushrooms? A lot of people take mushrooms to get a high, to see things, oh my God, I see a spider climbing the wall, whatever. Yeah, you could. But the whole point of a mushroom trip is to connect, open up your third eye to reach those higher dimensions, to understand things, again, to get the answers and questions that you're looking for. Like, I did that, for example, right? Apparently I took 3.5 grams or 3 grams and people are freaking out, how the hell did you survive? And I was like zen as I was straight as a dart. I could talk to you like I'm talking to you now. I didn't see anything different, but it kept me completely zen focused, and that's the whole point of the mushroom. It's not that you have to freak out on that everything around you is moving, and maybe for some,
Well, I think at the end of the day, it's how well are you connected with your senses.
Exactly, that too,
Right?
100% too.
Mushrooms, what they do is that they bring down other senses and they amplify your pineal gland. Pineal gland. And that allows you to see these things, right?
The third eye is your pineal gland, and your pineal gland is always there, but the problem with us in a regular day basis is that it's so suppressed and it's so calcified. And what I mean by calcified is that that's what makes it blocked, because of all the crap that we eat, because of all the stuff that we drink, because of the partying, the list goes on, right?
It's one of the worst culprits for calcification.
What is it?
Yeah, it's something that most people are consuming that really gunks that
Fluoride.
Okay,
Fluoride
so
is one of
that's the design in our water. That's the
one of the worst ones would be fluoride.
okay. So water filtration is
That's the biggest one that comes to mind. But I mean, again,
eating
stuff that's everything that's sugar, right? If we look at the biochemistry, if you're throwing your sugars off, you're gonna calcify just all cells in general. You're throwing your whole system off, in the sense where your body's not going to be able to absorb the nutrients that it needs to absorb. It's not going to bring the fats or the proteins to the cells like it needs to. So you're just creating more fat storage, calcifying the whole cycle, where your body or your cells are relying on processed sugar, and that processed sugar just starts to calcify in the body itself, and that could be one reason why you're calcifying your third eye or your pineal gland, right?
If that pineal gland was, just a question. If that pineal gland was as fresh as can be, as easy to access or to utilize as it could be, would it make it harder to be, like, I know there's critical thinking and all the things we learn through our life and our experiences, but is there a real component where access to that gland could make it a lot harder to be duped by some of these things that are presented every day? Is that fear mindset and that narrative much easier to digest if you have access to that third eye?
Digest in the sense that you could
Try digest mentally, yeah, like actually integrate. You're like, oh,
sure.
I know I'm looking at this and this, and it just.
Well, for sure, because when you're looking with your third eye, you see things more clear, right? So when you see things more clear, the answers are your feelings, depending on how your senses are. You'll be able to understand who's actually trustworthy, who's actually truthful, who could you depend on, who's actually wise, who's being fake, who's being real. So your third eye, when it's amplified, then that could help you.
Diet matters. That's what we're mentioning right now, right?
Yeah.
Because if you do go on an ayahuasca trip, you need to actually go on a diet like 2 weeks before you take
There's
it.
a lot of shit you gotta do before that.
Exactly.
No sex, no alcohol, dietists.
So at the end of the day, all these things do interfere with your ability to be open to the experience.
So when you read religious texts, they talk about these men. Let's use Jesus or anybody else as an example. There's often like big write-ups of some special figure going on some extended fast, and then this is when there's something magnificent that happens.
100%.
Is it possible we're relating to that kind of situation?
100%. The Buddha literally made sure that he didn't eat all these things, and then he had his experience.
So what happens in that? Do you know why that happens? Like why they intermittent fast and they get to experience all these experiences?
Because they're fasting out all that other stuff. That you just
But it's
talked
also
about.
because when we fast for too long, and this is why, to a certain degree, if you're not able to do it properly, it might not be a great thing.
It's dangerous.
It's actually for sure. But if you fast for so long, there's a certain chemical in the body, and depending on how you breathe, it's also you could also get to this chemical with Wim Hof method, the breathing techniques. There are certain mushrooms that get you to get to this chemical also, and the chemical is DMT. So that DMT that's what gets you as close as possible to ayahuasca. It gets you to that feeling of basically the same feeling like you would get with an ayahuasca, not as intense obviously, but basically you get to fight off your own traumas or fight your demons pretty much, depending your intentions. Of course, you could ask the questions, but there's that sense of the DMT that activates certain parts of the brain so that you can, I guess I could say, astral project.
And I think, and that's a great leeway to the fact that are aliens physically in the third dimension, or are they interdimensional?
They're interdimensional. And that's the reason why we'll take mushrooms, right? Because when you're able to take those, and again, I'm only saying mushrooms because that's the easiest thing for people to relate
He likes
to.
eating mushrooms on his pizza.
Not even. But it's the only thing that people can relate to and understand a bit more, is because when you open that third eye again, you're able to connect, and that's where you'll be able to connect with the extraterrestrials, is on that third eye level that you're able to see other dimensions, and that's why they come to you.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you've pushed back all the savagery that's inside of a human being, and you've become only a mental state of clarity.
Yeah, pretty much, because again,
And what's really cool, you should totally watch it, it's called The Awakening, by Dr. Stephen Greer, and he actually, no, that's the second movie. There's a third one where it's all about these meditations they do, and they have photographers using high-tech resolution photos to actually capture aliens. And you actually see them. It's insane. Totally go watch it. But you literally see it, because when we're talking interdimensional, we're talking rays of light that our naked eye cannot see.
Yeah.
But technology is advancing, and we can literally capture these things. And in these videos, you see it.
But if you want to talk about technology and stuff, I've shown you the videos of my cameras at the gym. No? Not these ones, but the ones.
Oh yeah, the lights.
The lights.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing when you close the lights and you just let it run, right?
Actually, another great
Infrared.
channel is called the Y-Files, and they actually did a whole episode on it yesterday of these lights.
But it's not even, well, yeah, it's lights, but
Well,
when you close
it's
the
a spirit,
lights,
right?
Yeah, exactly. So when you close the lights and you have that infrared cameras or whatever it is, it's not pitch black on your camera. You still see things, right?
And you see that little light,
And you see
around.
the orb fly. It's an orb, right? So that's the spirit.
Yeah.
And that's the things that are flying around. People think, oh, you're crazy. It's just a fly, or it's just a web. When you see multiple at a time going back and forth in your screen, no, that's not.
And if you want to go like more into lights, look at fireflies.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the chemistry that's inside a firefly. It's very interesting, because that stuff is in us. So the chemicals that go on in them go on in us. But again, like you mentioned, there's a lot of shit we take in that dims your lights. So that's the first thing. They're interdimensional. So if we are discussing interdimensional ones, then what is it of these ships that are UFOs, right? They're called Tic Tacs. And that's what's really being mentioned in Congress.
That's actually something I did see. I passed by it. Yeah. Was you that sent it?
I sent a lot of things.
Okay.
And the Tic Tac is more machinery. But here's the thing. It's reverse engineered machinery, right? Because you talk about Roswell, you talk about all these crashed things. The reason why they crashed is very important. See, there was an increase of alien UFO sightings after the atomic bomb. And the reason for that, and Dr. Stephen Green talks about it, is because the atomic bomb doesn't only go boom in a fiery way, it actually disturbs frequency on a level that it... He's telling the truth, that's why he's coughing. That it affected other interdimensional beings. And that's why so many came. But when they once came, with their ships especially, the frequencies broke it off. And that's why they crashed. And that's why there is a group out there, a company out there, that owns the wreckage. And because they own this wreckage, they've been using the technology for their own gains. And that's what we're at next. Why would somebody want to keep that away from society?
Why wouldn't you want to keep it from society if you want to keep all the power in your hands?
We also like to break things. You give us too much too soon, we tend to fuck things up.
And don't forget also, everything is put in our faces in movies, right?
Yeah, already. It sure
So
looks like they
we-
try to desensitize us long ahead of
100%.
time. Eh? You talk about aliens. There's a pretty big theme in certain movie genres for like 10 years, and it sure looks like it's culminating to now.
I always like using the Marvels and the DCs because there's always the multiverse and the interdimensionals and
Pronouns.
all those stuff. But also the fact that the time travel and
Yeah.
all the machinery and all the tools that they could use to put a superhuman being together, like they tried to do at MK Ultra. I mean, there's so much truth behind these things that people just think, oh, it's just the movies. But just like you're saying, with all these machineries, they're there. We know they're there. We don't have access to it.
Well, look at how technology has advanced so much from
Did
the
it really
1970s and now has stopped to where we are now.
Did it really advance? That's what I want to know.
Well, let's be honest, right? From not being able to fly to being capable of flying to being able to have a rocket, and then, like you just said, stopping it.
Okay.
Right?
So
I really feel the advancements between 1940 all the way until at least 1980 was a massive jump.
So here's another question: is it actual
More
advancements, or is it they were playing with us little by little? Here's one thing. Here's another thing. How the hell did you build the pyramids?
So there you go, right? So that's where the conversation of the first sightings and the first wreckage being from 1930 to 1950, right? Because once that ship crashed, the people who own it or took over it obviously reverse engineered so much of it and slowly, like Andrew says, gives it to us in little bites. Well, you said it too.
I say it all the time, but I actually didn't say it today.
Okay, never mind.
That's okay. Though.
Anyways,
I had a question
yeah.
before, because we're gonna go through all this guaranteed. It's going back to everything you talked about the pineal gland. Just to understand, you know how you could have a deficiency according to Western medicine in any aspect of your system. If you had an affected pineal gland in the positive sense, could that describe some of these people throughout history who are just exceptionally out of this world? You know, like there's some savant or some other people who are just always deemed as crazy, but somehow what they predicted or what they wrote is exactly how things turned out. Could that be someone who's in
you're talking about like Nostradamus.
an example? Sure, exactly, and so many other geniuses who are outside of what is regularly human.
Well, I would look at it this way. I would look at it as the fact that the Nazis obviously had technology way advanced. Like, if you really look at how the world united to go against the Nazis, it's because there was fear in the world that they had technology that others didn't.
And then when it was over, they wanted it, so they used them.
And that's where paperclip is a real thing.
But
Operation
Should Hike never disappeared.
But what
And-
you're talking about for the pineal gland,
Yeah.
back in the day, it's the fact of if you look at today's society, we look at clairvoyances as crazy people. So when you have that open mind and you're connected,
The wizard.
exactly. So you
Gotcha.
have that. It's the people that have the clairvoyance to see to see the clarity of beyond things, to actually put things into practice.
So not
So
necessarily
that's
the traditional genius. You're saying like the
They
people
probably
of
were
society-
geniuses also, but they used a certain part of their brain, like
Yeah.
the pineal gland, to connect. Because we do know that Albert Einstein was able to meditate and whatnot, and use his pineal gland even more.
His brain had a weird shape too. They measure the front of it. It's
Yeah.
like wider. It's just.
But that could be another reason why he was able to access his pineal gland differently, right? There's so many reasons why.
There's also the factor that there are those who are indoctrinated, and then there are those who have difficulty being indoctrinated, right? The fact that reading only came to be allowed to the public was in the 1700s. People get information today, sure, but now everything is really being controlled in what the information is being given.
Yeah.
Someone like Albert Einstein, Thomas Edison, all these people who invented stuff, they all mention how they had difficulty in school. And we all know that school is about indoctrination. So, pineal gland in the way that what we eat and everything and digest, but also the way we are informed and told this is the only book you're allowed to read. Because we've done really a lot of deep diving and book burning in this conversation, in these podcasts. So while somebody's able to open their mind to all these conversations versus someone who's very closed-minded, I think that really does matter. And the pineal gland does allow you to be open to everything, right? Like, I truly do believe that my pineal gland is open. Like, the fact that we can have these conversations,
And that's what
is
you have to
because
be
it's
careful
open.
with too, though. When your pineal gland is too open and you're depending if you absorb way too much and even the negative stuff, right? So that's what you have to be. That's where you have to be able to have the control of your own pineal gland.
Yeah,
and understand
because
the
if you go
differences.
too dark and too deep, you
It's
can
not
go
only-
nuts.
It's not only just going too dark or too deep. It's being given the information that might not be that might be false from what you're actually supposed to know. Type of
Right,
thing.
because then that negativity comes from your fears.
Yeah.
While
Or it piles onto your fears. It adds
Exactly.
to your fears.
because information is to flow in a positive light way.
Yeah.
But if you become very obsessed with certain things like that, and especially like you were saying,
Anything.
the idea that the false alien attack is going to happen, these are the things, right? Because Dr. Stephen Green does talk about how aliens are not against us. He verbalizes how aliens are either here to help you or they're not. And they will only help you if you're someone who's open to it.
Yeah. But if they're not gonna help you, if you're not open to it, but they're just gonna let you be. That's
let you be. Those who are interested in you, that's a whole other topic.
You know what was really interesting just now? I got excited. There's a few things. So today, my teacher, not a person who speaks outside of our curriculum very much, but takes me aside when I'm asking her a question, and she's like, "You're very specific, right? You go to the end of everything, you just bear it down." And she said a line, but it mimicked the line you just said on it being too open, and then knowing when to limit integration because you absorb too much. Eventually, it's destructive. But at the same time, this morning before class, I was listening to a rabbi speak, and he's saying the same thing. And it's not magical wisdom. It's like, yeah, you think about it, it's pretty obvious. But that all these people say it on the same day is pretty magical.
That's no coincidence.
It's cool. And you mentioned the 1700s, which is really cool because it's the Age of Enlightenment, right? The Illuminati found themselves with whatever other extra connections they have but the official founding of them is in 1776, May 1st.
And you know what else happened in that year?
Theology. But the U.S.
Theology.
1776.
And theology is the idea of you being allowed to see religion as what it is.
Yes.
An indoctrination.
That's an Illuminati like doctrine. That's the whole point. They don't want to distract from the wisdom in it, but they wanted to strip away what they thought men had created as like a manipulation tactic. Mm-hmm. They want to make everybody intelligent. They're also like big on pushing sexual agendas and stuff. Like some of the founders were like in ménage à trois marriages and stuff, weird stuff like that. But they just wanted to like rip the box open. But it's cool because you talk about that time, and I got a little excited because I was like, maybe that's where we are now. Maybe in the future they'll talk about the period we're now, because we're like, this kind of fucked up the last 3 years. But maybe it's going to give way to kind of what happened in the 1700s. All these inventors, all these great thinkers, because you mentioned a few, Edison, all these, and it's like there's like a sequence. Like there's a lot of stuff here, and then you culminate with the Nazis because there's a lot of people. They pumped a ton of money and every brain they could in their nation. And like, let's go. If they loved Jews, it would have been even better. Because look at the brilliant Jews who invented things throughout history in that period of time.
Look at
Oppenheimer was Jewish. Like, could you imagine if they had just accepted the Jews? The Nazis would have been a machine that there's no way they would have lost. They'd have every brain in the world on their team.
But maybe that's why they hated them so much.
More than likely, I don't know. I don't know the ideology behind it all.
Well, the ideology behind the Nazis hating the Jews is because the Jews believe themselves to be more loved than anyone else by God. That their suffering makes them the chosen ones.
Is that a bad thing?
It's not a bad thing. But the Nazis were very interested in everything religiously controlled. And so they felt that the Jews would be against that, right? Because the Nazis wanted to know where the Holy Grail was. Mm-hmm. They wanted to know where the Templar was.
The Ark?
The Ark of the Covenant.
The Ark carries.
They actually sent people to Antarctica to see what's there. Because they felt that there's all kinds of stuff with the Nazis. But at the end of the day, the real question is this. Aliens have been here for how long?
25,000 years, if not more. Why do I say that?
25,000 years.
Why do I say
Is it
that?
related to the evolution of our species? Like when we start establishing society structure.
You remember I
Homo
sent you guys
sapiens started?
even
I know nothing
the
about this
Anunnakis
stuff,
on stuff. I had sent about the Mike Lapointe.
I just mean I've read about mythology since I was this big.
Yeah,
I don't know what you guys are
This is
to.
what I'm saying,
Aliens.
right?
Yeah.
So the Anunnakis and stuff, right?
Oh,
we've spoken about them.
In Judaism, you call it Nephilim, like the angels, the fallen angels and stuff.
So the Anunnakis came, and that's basically who started with all the pyramids. Like there's a whole background into it. And again, I would have to just keep reading about all the history
They
behind
injected
it.
us with knowledge, is what you're saying.
But what it is they brought the technology from where they were to here, because they were the ones, and you could listen to Mike Lapointe's podcast. And yes, it's in French, but it's fucking phenomenal. And the fact of the matter is that they wanted to experiment and see what they could have made how they could have made us humans. So basically, we have a piece of Anunnaki inside us at a certain point. But there's actually real Anunnaki that are still out there. We just don't know about them. They're pretty much hiding from us.
They're Bigfoots.
Well,
They were very tall, right?
Sasquatch.
I don't ever read anything or watch Into This Tangent, but you guys do. It's cool, and I like listening to it.
So add on to the
build stuff.
Anunnaki stuff. What's his name? There was a guy who did the whole research of it. I'm forgetting his name now.
It's in religious text, though.
But he's the one who translated all the information. Zechariah Sitchin.
Okay.
So Zechariah Sitchin is the one who actually made these books.
Russian?
No, he made the book of the ninth planet, the Anunnakis. Everything he talks about is literally derived from his books. So the Anunnaki storyline is that the Anunnaki came here and needed gold. And it's because gold was going to make them protect their ozone layer of their ninth planet. So they first had other aliens working for them, but then there was a revolution. They got pissed off and said, I don't want to be your slave anymore. So they said, okay, how are we going to make this happen anyways? So they went and take a species, us, and they
created us pretty much.
Well, here's the thing. So they took those who were here. So, for example, we're Homo sapiens, whatever's before Homo sapiens. They took them and they injected us and they recreated us to become the perfect slaves.
Pretty much.
And it makes sense because slavery is so innate inside of us. You know what else is innate in us? The love for gold. Why? Out of all the materials in the world, why are we so horny for freaking gold?
It's a great,
right?
It's a great.
That's how.
It doesn't tarnish. It doesn't.
And this is all based on his translation of everything he watched in Iran or someplace in Iran, where he wrote down everything about the Anunnakis, and then they left, or some of them stayed to follow the angels.
So this is why I say the 25,000 years that we've been around, because what if, and this is something I actually just read last night, what if the Big Bang was the start of a new society? So there was 25,000 years before the Big Bang, and then the Big Bang happened. We lost all the technology that we already had before that. The Big Bang happened.
I think instead of
and
Big
it
Bang,
started all over again.
maybe the Big Flood.
We're talking Big Bang. We're talking 4.6 billion years, though.
Yeah.
Big Bang.
Yeah, because the Big Bang storyline.
So where's the Big Flood then?
So the Big Bang idea is that the whole galaxy began that way, right? Because the idea is that our galaxy comes from the galaxy before. Now, and that's the Big Bang story, based on science, based on everything that people talk about. But then when it comes to Earth, it talks about how 12,000 years ago specifically, there was a big flood.
So if we talk about the Big Flood, then...
But now, before that, because I like your 25,000 years, maybe even 2,500,000 years. Because if we look at when scientists see how our brain developed to what it is today, it's because of our prefrontal cortex, right? That's what made us different than all the other species before us.
Yeah.
That is for sure somewhere they involved themselves. I really think the Anunnaki came that moment.
It's very well, probably even before. That's what I'm saying. They probably came in before with all their technology, and when the Big Flood happened, as we say,
that's what 12,000 years ago.
So then maybe that's where we lost all this technology,
and
we had to rebuild all over again.
100%, because the story goes that 12,000 years ago, even the moon wasn't there. There's discussions about how
we created the moon for sure.
No. That's where it becomes real fun. Okay, so the story comes out that 12,000 years ago, there was a war between Lemuria and Atlantis.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: Lemuria were aliens, while Atlantis were the humans. By the time were so advanced, but they were those that wanted to enforce certain indoctrinations around the world. And the Lemurians, who had Galactic Federation of other aliens who were living there, said, no, that's going to be bad. You shouldn't go that direction, right? So there was a war. Something happened. And the flood happened. then the moon starts appearing, because there's a whole conversation about how there's actual inscriptions on big tablets about how the moon was not there, and how there was conversations about I remember when the moon wasn't there, right? So then that's where it leads to the idea that is the moon a moon base? And if you look at Y-Files, they talk about the moon. There's a whole episode of was the moon landing fake, right? And in that show, in the episode, they discuss how if you look at the impacts on the moon, they're all the same size.
Interesting.
So every impact you look on the moon is the same amount of depth, meaning that it's hitting something hard inside, meaning that it's very possible the moon is hollow. And they actually did, on one of the Apollo tests, a test of a vibration, and it came back that it is hollow. They don't want to talk about it, but it is. So then the question is, who's on the freaking moon? Right?
Well, that's the thing.
And isn't there a Indian pod there now?
Yes.
Like a rover from India right now?
Because today, and this is why the disclosure is really happening, because China and India, other than Russia and America, keep that in mind. In the 1960s to the 1970s, only Russia and America got to the moon. And the only reason they got to the moon is because they separated 20,000 Nazis who were really advanced scientifically. That's the only reason. Literally the guy who was in charge of NASA was one of the elite Nazis. So, take that, it's the truth, go have some fun with it.
Created the A1 rocket.
Now, the other thing too is, not only are they on the moon, they're in our oceans. Because our oceans...
Have you ever been to the bottom of the ocean?
Exactly.
We never know. There's so much life under the ocean. We
There's
don't even know about it.
There's scientific statements about how we've only mapped out maybe 20% of the ocean. There's a whole
massive.
80% that we have no idea what's underneath.
It's crazy.
Right? And the only reason we don't explore is because it changes the narrative. Right? Because the narrative has been for the longest time.
Can we get to that depth also is the other question. Or do we have the capacity to get to that depth? If they're able to get to that depth, are we able to get to that depth?
And that's why technology is being held against us.
There you go.
Right? Because Dr. Stephen Greer literally discusses about how there's a private organization out there who owns the rights to reverse engineering. And they don't answer to any government. They answer to themselves. So you can imagine that these people not only have UFO technology, where they can literally zoop out of everywhere, because the Tic Tacs, according to Stephen Greer, is owned by them. It's not alien technology. It is alien technology. It's reverse alien technology. But not only that, it's being run by human beings, right? It's being run by the secret elite group that owns this stuff. And right now, like Andrew's mentioning, there has always been a false flag alien attack theory. From the Pope! Right?
That is
So,
very powerful.
if you actually go look at a picture, not a picture, but just a ceremony of the Pope, and behind him there's these demonic looking things, that was actually made so that there was a conversation about how the Pope saved humanity from demons. But they were going to try to make it that it was that he saved them from demons being aliens, and they were the same thing. Crazy stuff, crazy theories.
So much out there.
You know, so you talked about a lot of things. You talked about aliens. You talk about certain time periods. You talk about floods. But you look, and he mentioned Pope, and you look at the Bible, and the Old Testament, and everywhere except the Orthodox Ethiopian Church has a massive book missing, the Book of Enoch. And right, you have in there it's broken down into tomes as well, and they're discussed. And it's fun. I was listening to a rabbi the other day going over them, where it's he's obviously breaking lines that he's not supposed to go You know, like like they have certain rules, they have certain beliefs, so they're not necessarily supposed to go into our text, but he's going through it, and it's like they're just different names for the different things you're discussing. Like you said, Anunnaki, because you're talking about ancient Sumeria.
Yeah.
You know, your
fallen angels,
talking Mesopotamia. You know, for them they call them the Nephilim, and their lust for human women, they would have bred and created giants, and these giants were abominations. Like there's a lot of. It's hard to tell. We're writing to help have some sort of seed of wisdom or how to operate your life comes into play, because there's like this whole story that the giants are sitting around a fire after they've kind of wiped out most of humanity and most of the crops, because they're just like they're portrayed as like these beasts that just devour, eat, and are dumb. They're 1D. Actually, I think they talk about dimensional thinking in the actual passage. Like they have this single dimensional thinking that they just like they consume like animals. They have no conscience.
Well, here's the thing, okay? So if aliens did interbreed with humans, you have to ask yourself what type of creation came out of them.
But so this is where it's fun with what you guys always talk about, both on the emotional and the alien stuff you're talking about. In the text, this is old, right? This is a very old book. These giants, after they've just sort of like big dumb babies, eaten everything, fucked everything, broken everything, burnt everything, they sit down around a fire and they're like, have you guys been having dreams? And all of a sudden they're like, their dreams are all this, they're all kind of the same. And then there's like these two guys who are supposed to be the like the sons of this one chief fallen angel, and they seem to be manipulating the group like, ignore their dreams, they don't mean anything. They're just like premonitions that are gonna go and destroy our fathers. They're the angels, they bred us, they're the problems. We're just children, we don't know what we're doing. And then they're all gaining conscience via dreams. So you talked about pineal gland, you talked about mushrooms, you talked about, so you can see like in an ancient text we're talking about development of cognition and of awareness and higher level thinking off of whatever experience, but they're using dreams as an example in the text.
Well, then it could be argued that they first were 1D and then they evolved really fast.
But they're using dreams in that text as an explanation, as a gateway for them to be like, there's more than just me eating and breaking and fucking. There's more. I can do good.
They can understand
because there's nothing left. The land is barren. It used to be beautiful. What did I do wrong?
And this is where the conversation
it's like exactly what you
royal families,
yes,
royal kings and queens, always, if you always look at an emperor story from Japan, from China, from even the English, the Britons, they always relate back to the idea that they were the ones closest to God, closest connection to God, right? King David and all of them, killing the giants and so on and so forth, right? But, if today they were to be here, they'd be Sasquatches, Bigfoot, right? Because,
what do you mean?
Well, if Bigfoot is real,
okay,
they'd have to be super intelligent to be hiding from everything.
You're saying King David would be a Sasquatch?
No, I'm talking about the fact that
the giants they mentioned in the stories
today would be the Bigfoots. And they would have to be super intelligent in the way that they're hiding from us. And to say that giants are a myth, have you ever seen a basketball player?
7 foot or less?
7, 8 foot. Like, to say that they never existed is to say you watching basketball players aren't real.
Genetic pockets in certain places in the world. Like you got certain pockets in the world. Like, cause if you start breeding the biggest and the strongest and the tallest, then I assume the genetic code gets passed on. But there's parts in the world that are kind of untouched. Like we talk about the old world, like Iran, Iraq, and Pakistan, and you're like, there's these pockets of like really big people. Big or tall, and they look different. Some are light-eyed in a place where everybody has dark eyes. They're different. It could be genetic selection.
But off a bit. We're talking about these
for
giants and stuff.
Yes, yes.
Have we actually scoped out every piece of land on this earth? We haven't.
I had no idea.
Where could they actually, if they're actually hiding, right? Well, just look at Quebec, for example. Who lives in the north of Quebec? Barely anybody.
I just don't know what they have as tech for imaging now.
Like some laser scanners do topography.
Like
this is exactly my point. This is exactly my point. Who lives in the north of Quebec? This is a prime example. We don't know anything that's happening in the Quebec because we're all to the south of Quebec, and okay, there's habitats, there's more vegetation, whatever it is.
You mean
but we
us?
don't.
Us. I mean like
I understand, but
humans.
I'm talking about them also.
Yeah.
Like, at the same time as what if they're there and we don't even know about it? This is what I'm trying to get at. Yes,
I'm listening.
We're always talking about there's underground world under the water and stuff, but who's to say that they are around us 24/7 anyway? But who's to say that they're just not in their own little habitats? Example again, north of Quebec. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, because aliens at the end of the day,
fighting.
the fact that Earth doesn't only have humans.
No.
How would we
100%.
know? How would we know? If they look exactly like us, you wouldn't know.
You don't know.
They bleed like us, they breathe like us. You wouldn't know.
The best thing is to remain open to it. Whether, like we've discussed a bunch of potential truths today, I think it's the biggest thing is if you're like regardless of what happens, you still have a chance to.
Oh, he's frozen. You were saying something?
Like the fact you're like there's a lot of stuff being presented today, and some people are going to write it off as just heresy right away, but the good thing is when you are open to it, it doesn't have to be true or false right away. You can just be open to it, and when it's like looking at another painting. There's so much involved in it. There's so much in perception, what you see, or like emotions, like you teach us. Our reality is a lot of perception because it's filtered through you and your life. Same thing with this. It's like it might sound crazy, but everything throughout history seemed crazy until it happened or it was shown.
People were hanged for thinking the world was the center of the universe, right?
All of it, right? So it's I know that I've heard stuff I never heard of before today, but I don't think that makes it wrong. It just means that it's forcing an expansion in cognition, and that for people who are watching, it's not a bad thing. That's like a good thing for a lot of things, anything in life, right?
So, I mean, the takeaway of all this is if you just have an open mind, keep your pineal gland open and be open to it.
What's a great thing people
And
do
if
today?
they start attacking us, it's not real.
How about little pieces of advice
So
from
yeah,
both of
if you want,
for your
if you want to
Sure,
talk,
that's a great idea.
what you could do for your pineal gland is gonna hurt, but what you could do to open your pineal gland is, every day or every night, close your eyes and try and look into the middle of your eyes. Wow, I already see it happening over here. Look into the middle, but try and focus on bringing your eyes behind your head, because that's where your pineal gland is, right? So the more that you're able to do that, it's gonna hurt at the beginning, it's gonna sting. But the more that you're able to do that, you'll be able to roll your eyes back enough so that you start seeing your pineal gland. If you're connected again, you'll end up starting to see images. So what you want to do is roll your eyes back as much as you can, and that's gonna help decalcify your pineal gland. You could also look up and look at a certain direction to stimulate different hemispheres of your brain. So right, left, but always keep it up. If you feel like on your left side it's hurting more, just keep it longer. And if it's hurting on your right side, keep it longer on your right side as well. So that's one way that you could decalcify your pineal gland.
Because that's how you open your third eye chakra.
Yeah, exactly.
That's fun. Is that today? That's interesting.
You see it.
So there's a lot of things that were discussed, but at some moments there were three very perspectives or very vocabularies on the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's talking about pineal gland, anatomy, physiology, and you brought up chakra, right? This is your bread and butter, but they represent similar things. It's cool. And like there's a moment you talked about aliens. He brought up almost like ancient mythology and stuff in Anunnaki, and I bring up a religious text. But they're discussing. It's cool.
It's all
The
interconnected.
conversations. It's just fun. It's just fun. It's like it's like when you're discussing anything, when the minds are all ready to be open and share what's inside them. It doesn't matter where it comes from. There's always there's a few points where they all kind of meet in the middle.
Yep.
It's nice. It's nice. I like it.
And my last thing to say is, if you have a growth mindset, it's best. A closed mindset, you won't go far. Let's be fully honest. If you think one way only and you think that's all it's going to ever be, that's where it is. And that's where the trap of fear controls, right? I really do believe that Dr. Stephen Greer is the best shot we have to letting the world, to letting others out there, other types of life out there, know that we're we're peaceful people too, but there are out there others that don't want us to be at peace, right? They make sure war occurs. They make sure we're in fear. But just keep in mind, it's all a show. Because if you've ever went to spend time with a group of kids or a group of people at a festival, crime isn't really there. And if you really want to talk about crime, half the time it's paid. It's being done on purpose, crime. So that's behavior, right? Because truthfully, we are peaceful people. Human beings are peaceful. This idea that we're innately evil is full of baloney, in my full opinion. And this is based on being a behavior interventionist and everything. Evil doesn't really, it's a choice. Evil is a choice. If you look at the Nazis, the intelligence that they were, it was an evil choice to do what they did. And that's what I'm going to finish off with.
Just remember one thing, like Chris said, growth mindset is going to help you, excel in certain things. But the more you know, the more you don't know. So just keep that in mind.
You feel it too.
Yeah.
If you really want to have a mind warp of what he just said, go check out Alan Watts.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you said eye exercises, useful. You mentioned them pretty. You detailed them well. You say water filtration too. Yeah. What else could they do? Either or, from because you are coming from.
Check out Dr. Stephen Greer. Check out Alan Watts, and always know that it's about having a good life. Look how nice the sun's coming out to what we're saying. That's the universe saying this was good.
You got a question? What you got?
If you don't know, now you know. Pretty much. Well, we still don't know because things change. Everything's permeable.
And there's so much to know.
Exactly. All right.
We care.
We care.
Oh, you're
Don't forget the L.